We know that Travis isn't going to be here, and Scott. No, there's no Zoom inable, but we are taping it.
You are broadcast.
Live and recorded.
Yeah, so no 5-second delay or anything.
No coffee.
Who would make the statement that we needed to bleep out there?
I didn't say for what reason.
Yeah, we kind of got what you were sowing.
I'm fine with that. I already can't believe I haven't been censured.
Oh, Scott actually says he's watching on TV. He got called away on a family emergency.
Aw.
Okay, great.
So I have to
Shoot.
press the button, right?
I was gonna have him report to council.
Hey, Jeff. How are you, buddy?
Getting really excited about grading after this.
Nice. Get fired up.
Jeff is going to ask a
That's
lot
how I
of
feel.
questions tonight.
Get fired up. Yeah.
Grades are due Wednesday, so
But
getting
you can sit
excited.
outside, can't you? You can do that? No.
One after another.
Yeah, I didn't today. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah.
Foolish.
That's what my husband said. Maybe you guys can sit out in the lawn and do this. I said,
Tomorrow I'm gonna grade. I should grade at the park.
Alrighty, I think we can start, everybody. We've, yeah, welcome to live and in person.
Yeah, who are you?
And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So Keith, we do roll calls still, even though we're in person, right?
Correct.
All right, why don't you kick us off, my friend?
All right. I'm just going to go left to right. Feldman,
Present.
Thompson,
Present.
Hemingway,
Present.
Aronshorst,
present.
Christians,
Present.
and Brian.
Present.
And
In
we
person.
We have two members
Holland,
absent.
Live
Michigan.
from City Hall.
That's right. Great.
And you have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. All right. Okay, great. Well, we'll just jump right in because why not? So we get to look at the meeting minutes from last time. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Boyd. A second.
Support.
Thanks, Nikki. Any discussion? I'll wait a few seconds for people to unmute. Any Zoom jokes, huh?
Yeah, right.
Go ahead. Did you have something over there? Did I see a hand? No? All right. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The meeting minutes get approved. Public comment. Joe, Ann? Anyone else? Keith, would you like to put on your citizen hat and tell us something?
I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Okay, thank you so
Oh,
much.
that's awesome. We're not supposed to respond.
Oh, thank you, Keith. Okay, great. That was quick.
That's right.
We need to acknowledge the online public comments. That needs to get voted into the record. Can I have a motion to?
So moved.
Thank you.
So moved.
Thank you, Tim. A second.
Second.
Thanks, PJ. Any discussion on the e-comments? All right, moving right along. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, great. The online comments are officially part of the record. Thank you to all who submitted. Great. Well, we don't have an education piece today. If you're just tuning in, we've been on a journey these last number of months, learning lots about the 5 levers and all kinds of things. And then last time, we had a bit of a report out from Joe on his research of the other comparable communities. And we had more than 30 seconds for Joe, but less than maybe what we needed, especially relative to all the work that he put in. So we've just got time today to lift up comments or questions or reflections that people had from the work that Joe did, and then also just continue that discussion around the benchmarking in other cities and whatnot. So, yeah, I'm interested in what people thought of the report, having had a couple of weeks to look at it.
I'll start off. I'm at the next to the last page under the recommendations part, because it was interesting in taking a look at how different communities approached, in many cases, environment and sustainability, as opposed to, quote, where our direction has been more towards an energy plan per se. But I thought the recommendations that Joe had put in there, I think we need to take to heart as we're putting forward with our own recommendations to council on the direction and the actions that we as a community should be undertaking. So, but very well done, very helpful, and interesting to see the scope and scale and different approaches by each of the four comparable communities.
Tim, can I ask, did you find any of the other communities and how they're approaching it, if it's different than us, compelling or in particular interesting that we should be paying extra attention to? Or
Well, one of my concerns, it's always it wasn't meant to be a pun, but in the climate that we're dealing with, that we need to be realistic. We also need to be optimistic, though, from the standpoint that adopting as a community, a can-do attitude, but based on based on science, based on what makes absolute sense. And some of the things that I'm expecting to come out of this committee are going to be a stretch. I mean, it's going to push us as a community, a combination of partnering with all different parts of the community. But let's be realistic. Let's not go, I mean, we could all sit here today and go, well, we want zero by 2030. Well, okay, and how are we going to get there? And how are we going to afford it? And is there science available for us to be able to reach whatever the goal might be? So I found it interesting in taking a look at not only the four, but the other ones that had been reviewed on the part of Joe. And there's some common threads, obviously, in there. But again, it came down to not, quote, an energy plan, but more a community sustainability plan, looking at it from a long-term perspective.
did you? So I found that layer to be interesting as well. Do you think that's something that we like, that our energy focus, at least in the nomenclature around the plan and a lot of the emphasis of the plan, do you feel like that's good or limiting, or what was your take on some of the other communities like sustainability bent? Because I'm genuinely, the history and the way back machine is that the community energy plan got birthed, if I'm not mistaken, out of the sustainability committee, which was a thing at City of Holland,
Right.
whatever, 15 years ago or 12 years ago, right? Anyone who knows?
Yeah, that's correct. The Sustainability Committee was first formed, and there was going to be a look at multiple different facets. And again, that committee has also already, additional to helping to get the community energy plan created, that committee also submitted to the city a framework, a sustainability framework, which is beyond energy. It's, more comprehensive than that.
And I think, from my perspective, one of my takeaways in taking a look at these other communities is to Dave's comment just now, it's beyond energy, obviously includes it, and a dramatic part of it, but it comes down to how are we as citizens and as business people and educators and all of that, how are we going to be changing our lives and the manner in which we go about our lives, both as individuals and business and government, you know, et cetera, sort of the public-private, because there's going to have to be a transition. You can't achieve, and those 4 communities that have been highlighted cannot achieve those goals with the status quo. They've got to change. And there are so many different moving parts to the overall environment of a community that you've got to have a very comprehensive plan that then breaks that down into doable actions that go not only from government to private industry, private enterprise, but down to how do you live your life where you live? Yeah, how do you get to and fro? And I mean, all the different attributes of life.
Yeah.
So to me, back to your question, sustainability, long-term sustainability is more, to me, more directional as opposed to the energy and energy plan of itself, which is an absolute integral part, but if we're really looking at to me, a bigger picture on what's Holland going to look like in the next few years, let alone 2030 or 2050.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Other observations or reflections, Jeff? Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
just-
Go ahead, Jeff.
So one thing that I think is going to be important for all of us to keep in mind is, I think as Tim was saying, like the sustainability question is such a big and broad question and touches on so many things that I don't want to get caught up in too much of that. Rather, I think it's important to like focus on what the main thing be the main thing and not get caught up on metrics and targets and stuff for all of the different aspects and get bogged down in kind of the administrative aspect of tracking all of these different things and putting resources into measuring all of the different aspects and rather like focus our resources where we're on the main thing. And that's where I guess I would maybe, I think I agree with you, Tim, that sustainability is much bigger than energy. But I guess energy is the biggest part. So I guess I'm looking at some of the stuff that was kind of pulled out. I forget which city it was specifically. If it was Dubuque, Iowa, maybe. Trying to look up at the report.
A masterpiece on the Mississippi.
But I think some of the stuff that was really pulling out that jumped out for me was, you know, how do we be investing resources in the kind of the administration of whatever plan we make versus actually implementation of the plan. And I think if you make it too big and amorphous, more of your resources and time go into the administration part rather than implementation on the big aspects of it.
Great. And I'm assuming you mean we should avoid doing that. Okay, just to be clear.
You never know.
Yeah, Nikki, did you have your hand?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was a terrific report, and thank you. This was well organized and well written and clear. I wanted to almost say, where did you learn to write? But a couple takeaways for me is Holland is already right up there in the game. We've been doing sustainability for a while. We have had an energy plan. And they did say or the report said one of the problems was if you set metrics or goals and you don't have the infrastructure to support that, you're kind of behind things. You're trying to play catch up. And we really have had that all these years. And I think sustainability, yes, is the kind of the overall thing, but this is an energy committee and an energy plan. So I think that should be our focus. One thing they all say too, they all use renewable energy, sustainability, and climate change. And we never have really mentioned climate change as being a part of this. And I think maybe it's time to put that in the mix. They also mention, the report mentions, almost everyone has a a dedicated person or persons or a committee to continue to follow this, and I think that's pretty important too, because it's easy to have things kind of, oh yeah, like on this committee, you know, I'm not working every day on this, but, you know, you kind of go at it, and I think it's important to have someone or some people follow this as their job. I mean, if that's how we're dedicated, if you want a mayor and a council and a community, the city, support this, I think you have to actually support it with that kind of action. And I like that. Sometimes there's a lot of words, but no action. So I would prefer not to just say, we can do this, this is good. Let's do something, let's keep at it. I mean, I think that's how this is gonna happen.
You referenced a couple of things there that I want to just dig in on a little bit, just so I'm clear. You said that you'd like to have climate change on the table.
I would like those words put somewhere. They are in all these energy or sustainability things, reports and issuing from these cities mention that with renewables and this and that. Why are we doing this? Just to, I mean, we always want clean or reliable and affordable energy, power. Why are we doing all of these things? To save money, to save our earth? Why are we, you go down the reasoning, and now it's coming down to climate change. That's kind of why we're concerned here. One of the reasons why we're concerned, and I think that should be mentioned.
As like a motivation for people?
As part of this, yes. And the leadership comes from us. It was also mentioned, the community, it has community support, but the leadership really has to come from here and get those. And we've done that with our education portion. We've have plans to get the community, whether it's businesses or residents involved, but we are the leadership.
Out of curiosity, just would, like if somebody is motivated by something other than climate change, but the end result is the same thing, does that, I don't know how much we, like, parts of what goes into the report or not personally, and like I don't really know like all the words that will be included or not included, but is your perception that people will take the plan more seriously, or will, I'm just wondering why the inclusion of that versus, like, I don't know, I'll make up something else, like energy independence.
Yeah.
Why isn't, like, should all the motivations be listed, or I guess?
Yeah, I think different things appeal to different people. Some people might say climate change, that's my baby. And others might say, I like the idea of renewables, I like clean. And others might say, yes, energy independence. And that was a huge thing years ago. And all of a sudden the natural gas thing happened, and that wasn't a huge concern anymore. But different things appeal to different people. You want to get as many people supporting you as possible. If the city supports it and is leading this, then you want businesses. What appeals to businesses? What appeals to a resident?
So like a section in the report potentially on like all the hypothetical things that might motivate someone, or, to one degree or another, part of our motivation, that would be like a worthwhile part in the report, is what you're saying.
I think so. It should be mentioned. It should be mentioned, and it's in every, it seems, in every city's report. And it wasn't like, it didn't have to be jumping out at you. This is why we started it, but it was always renewable, sustainability, climate change, da-da. And I thought, okay, everybody seems to mention it, but we don't mention it, and I'm not sure why, because it certainly is one of the elephants in the room. If you read our letters and what some people are wanting, they're talking about it, and I think the world is talking about it.
Yeah, it's an anybody, any comments on that?
Mr. Chair, just a comment that if we go back to the original community energy plan, I believe, and Dave, you correct me if I'm wrong, there were metrics that were established, and that was basically CO2 per capita. And at the time, it was at 24 tons, and if no action were taken, there was modeling done that said it would increase to 32 tons, is that correct?
37.
Oh, excuse me, see, I was wrong, 37 tons. Well, and I can't remember, but if you're saying there were actually no words in that document at that time that said climate change, we were very clearly, as a community, trying to address our carbon footprint, which by cross-reference is addressing the fundamentals of climate change. And subsequently, we're at 19 now, Dave, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we've made progress. To me, the charge of this committee is how do we further that progress and hopefully actually increase it based on sound science and outlooks and economics to ultimately make Holland a better place. I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's, did you, hold one sec, Dave, did you have something, Boyd? Or, go ahead,
It's a
Dave.
new topic, so.
Oh, yeah, let's,
let
yeah.
Dave finish
Yeah,
something.
maybe just bring a little bit of, from the conversation back when the plan was presented in. I think it's a very important dialogue here that we're talking about in terms of metrics and the why. At that time, carbon was seen as, yes, an element that would be a potential impact for climate issues. The metrics in the plan, carbon was intended to be a proxy to efficiency. So the idea behind it is that if you show progress on carbon, that means that you're showing progress in terms of efficiency. And I don't mean just efficiency of a building, I mean efficiency of systems.
Right.
In order to make energy happen in the community and be put to use in the community. So it was really kind of a proxy for that, but it also, as Tim mentioned, obviously has an impact in terms of the fate of it and what kind of potential ramifications it could have for climate.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff?
So I guess I would kind of echo what Nikki is saying, that I do think that it would be worthwhile to lay out the motivations for why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing. And I think there are like energy independence and efficiency, and like there are a lot of different motivating factors. But if your motivation is not climate change, there are different targets than if your motivation is climate change. So I think what our eventual goal is and what the actual target is going to have to be, like, it's going to have to fit under what our specific motivation is. Right, so just to be frank, like the 10 tons per capita is a fine target if you're talking about energy independence, or you're talking about even the kind of environmental and like local pollution and some of those metrics. That can be a fine target, but it's not a good target kind of in the broader sense in terms of climate change. So I do think having a discussion, and I guess I would support having a discussion sooner rather than later about what is a realistic short-ish term goal. I know a lot of people have thrown out 2030 as kind of a realistic time frame. A lot of the other cities have. But I do think reassessing what that long-term goal is really will be important for us to make sure we're putting ourselves on a path where we're doing things today that we're not undoing 10, 15 years down the road. That, the steps that we're taking and the recommendations that we're making are things that are compatible with where we ultimately want to end up.
Yeah, thanks, that's great. Yeah, I think it's important, we're writing a report that the city council is going to read. And so the decisions to list what everybody's individually motivated by or not, or all of it, or I don't know if there even could, that's an open discussion I think that we'd have to have, is like, does it matter if we put motivations in there, or if we're just setting the goals or not? And if the goals are in line with something, whether we named it as a motivation or not, does that matter? I'm not suggesting one thing or the other. I'm just saying I think it's for us to decide is, you know, like whether or not we want to include, like if we want to include every single hypothetical potential reason why anyone would get excited about the plan or not about the plan. And I mean, there could definitely be a section in there about that. I don't think that would be wrong, but that would be a group, I think, discussion that we would want to have, because, you know, like, personally, I think about, like, motivation, like, a goal and what your motivation are don't, like, I work in this business, energy and sustainability, and what I love about it is I never have to talk anything about motivations about our services, and everybody that I talk to can get excited about what we do. And I don't have to define that for them. They can define it for themselves and live into the actions. And so that's personally, I like to not use words that some people might get turned off by either way, such that everyone can see the actions and be like, I like that for this reason, and my way of entering into it. So that's just my take, is to be as inclusive in our language as possible. And I'm not saying that does or doesn't include certain words or not. I'm just telling you how I feel about it. And so as we march down the path of getting community feedback and mapping out all this stuff, like, you know, that'll be a collective discussion, I think, around, like, what are the ramifications of all the words that we're putting in here, right? Like, I don't want to turn, we just got to be, you know, cognizant. This is a communication and marketing exercise to a degree, you know, and so we want to make sure that, because we all think, I think the work is important, we want to make sure that the language that we use is a rallying cry for the action, for as big of a group of people as possible, if we want the numbers to be as small as possible. And the words we use in the report are going to impact that one way or the other. So that's just my 2 cents on it, is we just need to be cognizant of, the term big tent comes to mind. Like, I'd like, you know, as many people in town as possible to read this report and get excited about what we're recommending. So that's me saying a whole bunch about, and not saying anything exactly, but, anyways, those are my 2 cents on it. Any other comments on that? I think it's a great discussion that needs to be had and will be had over the next number of meetings as we write the report.
I just have comments on a new topic, still related to this analysis. So since the first meetings, when I sat down, usually when I go into a problem, I'm looking for structure, organization, who's leading, has that been invested in properly? Is the target clear? And are those that are, who's responsible for achieving the target? And when I look through this, I think from a strategic standpoint, it's one of the biggest things you can do right away is evaluate, are the right butts in the right chairs? Have the chairs been put in place even, you know? And when I kind of look at what we have now, where we've gotten to, for me, it seems like there's a gap in investing in a structure institutionally, in leadership to get there. We have wonderful leaders at the top. A tone has been set in a document. And when I look at the benchmarking analysis, I think one of the clear lessons from some communities was they're stalled because, I see your head shaking, they are stalled because there is maybe a clear target. There was a wonderful document that came out, and now it's not being permeated into lives. You know, whether at City Hall and out into the community, into our business, you know, things like that. When I look at Grand Rapids as an example, having seen that, it looks like as one of their biggest obstacles up front, you know, investing in this Office of Sustainability. I'm not endorsing that how they did it was right, but the idea that a structure and an investment in a group of people were set out to really permeate it, it sounds like into everyone's jobs, probably into job descriptions. I don't know if you know that's the case, but it reads like targets have been set around this idea, just like you would diversity and inclusion. You know, that kind of thinking, right? So I think we have a wonderful benchmark possibly for structure, institutional definitions, investing in people to take the charge forth. Probably starts centrally, but then it's decentralizing it is the approach, and that's a big deal. You know, a lot of things collapse pretty quickly if you just stay centralized, right? It's distributed controllership. Works if it's done well, as long as you've got good central leadership. It can be done skinny. I don't think you need to overinvest. You should be very clear strategically who it is, and do they have a really clear mandate? Have they been empowered to take that charge out? And is it a big deal that's sustained? Is it on council's agenda? Is it in the paper? Is it in job descriptions? You know, who is that distributed team that you're pushing it through? So it seems like, for me, that's one of the biggest things I was hoping would come out of this, is who's maybe figured out and where are they in their learnings, so we can leapfrog learnings on what might more institutional investment look like. But not to build walls, not to build a silo, you know, not to overinvest either in something like this.
Brian, that might be as good of a time as any where I can say a couple things to that. And I think most importantly, not really answer the question like in a way, but really say, one of the things that Dave and I have done, we talked to, just so you know, we talked to Brian and Travis, kind of asked them to reflect on this also. And what we've asked is, we've asked Joe actually, now that he's gone through this process and kind of looked externally at other communities, that he's actually going to go through now another exercise and kind of take that same lens that he looked at others and turn it back on us and do that same look.
It's wonderful.
Now, I really think of that, Boyd, two ways, and Joe's just heard about this conversation last week, so like he's still got time. But I think he's been involved in our structure, right? I really think of that in two ways, Boyd, and I think this is something that in your conversations, we've had a lot of conversations about too. In the report, there was kind of like this internal organization focus, and then there was just a realization of, when you talk about the community, they're integrated, they influence each other, but they are different,
Yeah.
right? So what we really want is that Joe's going to take a look back, and Dave and I could talk for a while and say, well, these are the things that we think we have in place, but then you're just hearing Dave and I talk. We've asked Joe to take a look and say, okay, here's what you've learned from the other communities.
Yeah.
What does that look like for us?
Mm-hmm.
And not only then is that structure piece, and then part of that is, I expect that Dave and I will have conversations with Joe too about what we've already been changing and putting into place, because council has made a lot of investments in those areas.
Yeah.
So that'll be part of it, because I think that's important to have it in that report. But I think what it also does, and really Tim brought this out when he talked about it, is, I'll say it from my perspective. I have a perspective, I think informed, that says when you take a look at the other communities about what maybe they have accomplished over the last 10 years, I think the report nicely kind of says maybe some of those communities haven't really
Yeah.
accomplished much.
Right. Stalled. Yeah.
And I think I have a personal informed perspective that, quite frankly, we have accomplished real things in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But again, nobody wants to hear from Dave and I, but I think that's really an opportunity for Joe to take a look at that and categorize, discuss, and maybe put some numbers to that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and my comments are more about the future, not the past.
Totally.
It's can we, doing doing things the way we are now, can we get there? My personal opinion is no, if we keep doing and so what is it we need to do? And I keep going back to structure and organization and bigger investment in the idea, but, so I wasn't taking anything.
Oh, and I'm not,
Prior to today,
not defensive, right? But I think you have to understand where we came from,
oh yeah.
right? And then there's a
Wow.
structure. And I think it's going to be important too of, the report talks about the difference between internal and community.
I could
And there's
picture
kind of a
language.
restriction to both of those.
Because I could picture and I see Dave, I could picture language that's talking more about we're ready for a bigger investment in this idea. Where I honestly don't know that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, from what I've learned so far, we probably weren't ready to do it the way we're maybe need to now. It feels like with all the, ground under our wheels that have happened, and a lot of the low-hanging fruit that has been accomplished. Now we're into a much more sophisticated place, possibly.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave, yeah.
I think that's a great observation. I think, what Keith started to talk about, didn't maybe drive it home here a little bit, is that, the words you use, empowerment and control, and having, Keith alluded to a little bit on internal and community, right? And I've heard Tim talk about how every business and every person is gonna have to decide, what's gonna change for them. And I think that's a really key observation in terms of these communities that have been contrasted, and also the communities that haven't been, but also are showing up on there's a new ICLEI Race to Zero that's out there, and I watched a lot of videos that were from those communities, and the focus, and I think a lot of the achievement have been in the things that are within the control of the city itself, its own operations, and leading and trying to show the way, and also to provide on-ramps and opportunities, which I think, our on-bill financing is an opportunity, to do that. We've talked about PACE financing, should a district be here, or other mechanisms to do things like that. But it's going to take an action on the part of the citizenry and on the part of the businesses to do that too. So this empowerment and control aspect, I think, what makes things successful sometimes is control is important to make things successful, as opposed to encourage things, but then you'd have to win the hearts and minds of everybody in the community too, that this is an important priority for everybody in the community to get on board with.
And I'll use one more micro example.
Go ahead.
With the DDA, you've got a citizenry board of business owners, residents, very diverse board. We've never, in the 5 years I've been on that board and now chairing it, had a conversation about sustainability in our downtown and how that links to our state constitutional mandate to increase values and fight blight. But we've never had that on our agenda. And there is a way to provide leadership into groups like that to get us thinking about it, get it into our day-to-day plans, our discussions, which is also with the public, right? But we are a citizenry board and things can happen. So there's a way, the way our community's built, I can see so many paths to push this strategy down in a way that isn't centralized control. It's distributed control. And that's just one little example. I could picture the parking board. I'm just talking about our little central part of town, right? And I know there's a lot of other ways, to, the Lakeshore advantages to invite them in. But I think bandwidth for what you gentlemen do in, for your roles, the bandwidth isn't possible for you to accomplish what I'm saying as we get into a much more sophisticated place now to really go.
And again, I almost feel like I just want to take a real quick second, just so you know, because council supported me and Dave on this.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons in the last couple of years that the new assistant city manager position that we put in is part economic development and part sustainability.
Yeah.
Now, just the reality of the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
And some of the opportunities it presented, that's not fully in place yet, but the funding and the commitment is in place, which is huge.
Yeah.
And then with Dan Borsma, our new sustainability project manager, which used to be the parts of a couple different people, now it's one full-time job just on that. So, and I don't say that, please don't take that as defensive, Boyd. I think it's wonderful, right? Because I think you're seeing that, and the timing is really good, because then this report and these discussions can really focus, I think, the increased investment that we've made.
Yeah.
And we've made that increased investment largely because exactly what you're saying is where I heard from council and the community, and basically we responded and said, hey, we're gonna put those pieces in place
Yeah.
so that we can do exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Now, there's always the debate, right? Well, you're not doing enough and you're not moving fast enough and all, like those, that's the tension we always live in. But I'm excited about it, and, you know, we keep moving forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hope we can endorse, yeah, just provide more endorsement for those actions.
Yeah, Travis and I were really excited to hear Keith and Dave have the idea around Joe turning the research around on ourselves. I think we've all got some hypotheses on how that's going to shake out and what we're going to see relative to these comparable communities, but it'll be really good to see it actually happen. My sense is, having been involved in the community energy plan loosely for whatever, 7 or 8 years, there are a lot of existing mechanisms and things that are happening, but and as represented by the last 6 to 9 months of like learning about all the stuff going on, right? I think that Nikki referenced like increased ownership on like, whether it's a committee or whatever, but like, I think the ongoing like consistency of the communications around all of the programs that are available for people is definitely something that will be an opportunity for all of us to be chewing on, because the distinguishment between, because a lot of these reports, right, like the city of Grand Rapids talks about their own facilities, and you know, there's a lot of places that are talking about their own stuff that they control as like tied to their goal, their aggressive goal. And, you know, the community energy plan historically has been inclusive of things outside of a lot of people's control. And so that's back to the communications and marketing exercise around like, do we have great available programs? Are we making them better and easier to adopt and jump in on? And are we distinguishing in the report infrastructure, I think, like what can be controlled by the people in this room and what need to be adopted by, you know, residents, right? Residents and business owners. Like that's, you know, nobody gets to zero regardless of what you're motivated by unless businesses and residents are participating, you know, like, and I think a lot of these communities, I think that we don't have as big of a hill to climb in terms of addressing that, which is what I'm hearing,
Yeah.
you know, is that's what's exciting. And I think, Boyd, what you reference is around like, I think we can go fast because of how far we've already come. And so, yeah, it is exciting, but I think it's important for us to distinguish and lift up things like we need to have a serious investment into the infrastructure and organization and communication of the plan. And it's really important to distinguish, this is what city can control, this is what BPW could control, and then everything else is, you know, people are using the phrase on-ramps a lot, which it's a good visual. But people got to drive onto the on-ramp, right? Like, and we have to have a mechanism in place to find out if they didn't, why. And so, anyways, but yeah, I think a lot of it's, you know, these are nuanced sort of observations having been in this 6 months, but those I think are some of the really important ones that will distinguish, I think, in the report. So, other observations or questions for Joe while we got him here about the great work that he did, maybe about his methodology, or, yeah, PJ.
Joe, again, fantastic work, just repeating what everybody said, just really want to affirm everything you're doing. Is there opportunities to look outside the United States too?
I think there's definitely opportunities to look outside the United States for certain programs. What we found, looking just in-state and nationally to start with that benchmarking matrix that had the indicators, as soon as we got out of state, it really started to blow up where there was different conditions and things at play, so it was hard to compare. And then once you go nationally, it's even more difficult, right? Like the Midwest is a little bit closer, but then you get further and there's more variables at play. So we could look for unique programs if there was things that we specifically wanted to look at, if it was something in Europe or something in Asia like that. But looking for city-to-city comparison, the data is not there to do an apples-to-apples type of benchmark.
I agreed. Just to follow up, and I would kind of asking this from a industrial manufacturing standpoint. When you look at some of the things that are being done in Europe, in particularly like countries like Ireland, you see more areas that are more like Holland, that have high concentrations of manufacturing. And I find that exciting to see some of their community energy plans and such, and would love an opportunity if it presented to maybe meet with you sometime and maybe just share a couple things that are out there that I've seen and see if it couldn't, be of use to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Those focus targets of looking at things that are precise like that, we can definitely do. And that would be a great place to leverage the resources Holland has, like the USDN and ICLEI, those memberships we have. We can communicate with some of those communities that are part of that network to ask those precise and specific questions about how they're handling those things. So there's definitely the resources there for that.
Did we use anything specifically, ICLEI and the Covenant of Mayors and another organization where it was mentioned in this report? Do we use, I know we belong to ICLEI, I believe. Do we use some of their resources ourselves now?
So we are a member of both of those organizations, and I know in the past, so with Dan being new, I'm not sure how much he's engaged, but we have engaged with programs in the past and different educational pieces. For this specific report, we used a couple of the forums and connected with some contacts we met through ICLEI and the USDN, but nothing that was like a large-scale, multi-city effort went into this piece. But we did leverage those contacts, and we worked with them in the past.
And what I would say, Nikki, is Joe, kind of before Joe and Dan, right, is that there's been a lot of engagement and kind of watching what comes over the wire, if you would, from those organizations. And trying to kind of go, okay, like, we're doing recycling. So they were very helpful as a resource, so that when we took a look at redoing our recycling initiative, which is great, it fits into the story earlier. That's all about sustainability, right? But really it has not much to do with energy, but we relied pretty heavily on them. So it's kind of a best practice and like an idea generator, like, hey, that might be something that we could take and use here. Now, that being said, like, we've almost been the place where a lot of those places have called and asked us, hey, how did you do on-bill financing, for example, is the pretty obvious one that comes. So we've probably generated as much that we fed back into the network as we've downloaded. Fair,
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't
fair to
know.
say.
They're always mentioned, and I didn't know what our involvement was. Thank you.
Anything else for Joe while we got him here?
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, Joe, awesome report. Super encouraging. Honestly, like relative to these other communities and everything, like, and we're excited to, you take a look at us and then we'll get the, official apples to apples comparison. But, nothing but excitement, I think, from my perspective in terms of what we can do relative to what's already all been done and what's in motion. So it's just like, we're a moving train and we're just going to hop on board and press the gas down a little harder. So it's good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Joe.
thank you, Joe, and Mr. Chair, I was just gonna mention too, that as far as the report layout, you know, kind of starting with this background and history that is already kind of written in draft form at this point, that next section of the report is really that community comparison side of things. So when Joe is done with that work, then they'll be looking at being able to take the full totality of this community comparisons along with being able to look at introspectively at Holland, and then have that portion of the draft report ready to go.
Great.
Which then, I think, you know, we'll be talking about, you know, what then, you know, and I think the what then is sort of, what are the opportunities then? Hearing the history, hearing the community comparison, you know, what are the strategies that could be looked at, you know, for the next period of time, and that's sort of that last part of the report. So, you know, Joe's work, I think, is pretty close to complete now once he looks introspectively to kind of help build the draft of what that middle section looks like.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks, Joe.
All right, thank you. I think I hit my 30-second quota here, so.
Yeah,
We're all
it was
set.
your
Nice to see
time
you
and
in
we
person.
still
Is the
just,
meeting
you know.
over now?
It's a good sign of respect, Joe, when everyone's like, I don't even want to ask you a question because he's already got it covered.
So with that, we basically have we don't have a ton left today, but what we do have left is, I think, important to get your input on. So, and Keith and Dave, you'll have to forgive me. I don't remember if I was going to do this or if one of you two was going to do it. But Travis and Keith and Dave and I met last week, and we talked about, like, okay, we've gone through the 5 levers. We've got Joe's report. You know, how do we begin to set a course to landing the plane here? And so a big part of what we don't have is the community feedback. You know, talking to residents, talking to businesses, talking to the major employers. We've talked about spinning those things up in the past, and so we just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the next couple of months and how those things might look. And so I don't know, was that you, Keith, or was that me to lay that out specifically? I can.
If you have it, great. Otherwise, if you have it, great. Otherwise, we can supplement, I'm sure.
Make this up as you go along.
No, well, I'm certain it'll be corrected if I messed up. No, so Trav and I have it on our task list to spend a chunk of time in the next couple of weeks sitting down with everything that's been talked about and mapping out a little bit of a more detailed bullet point sort of layout of the recommendations for the strategies based off of the levers, okay? So, and correct me if I'm not allowed to do this. I think what we were talking about doing was then sending it individually to people to consume and read. And then on June 14, so in basically a month, we would get back together and we would discuss what we sent you and your feedback on what you like and don't like, and we hammer out some specifics around some of the recommended strategies. And then if that needs to bleed into the June 28th meeting, we can leave time to do that. Along the way, Dave and Keith are going to be engaging continually with Julie Ornay from the Frost Center, the research place, and we're going to be getting questions for the different, I think we have 3 groups. The major employers, which is more of the what Jim Stelter has been talking to us about, like the listening tour, one-on-one sort of vibe. And then we've got the 2 things through the Frost Center, which is Julie Ornay and her team. And that would be for commercial businesses, you know, not major employers, although major employers could probably fill it out just the same. And then a residential one. We want, and this is we want your validation on this, we envision the residential and the regular business surveys to be, we think it would be better for people to be responding to something a little more specific to get better feedback versus something overly broad. So that would mean if we can feel good after the 14th and the 28th of June about some of the specifics that we have in place, then a lot of the questions could be riffed off of where we've landed. Well, landed, I'll maybe retract that. Where we think we'll land. So the idea was, do we get feedback off of, before we've sort of created a draft, and we thought it made more sense to get feedback off of a draft so that we can take that feedback in and then edit our draft to be representative of the community feedback. So does that, versus getting community feedback off of something ambiguous and then taking that plus everything we've done and try to merge that into a report? Travis and I felt like it made more sense to give the community something a little bit tighter to respond off of, such that we could then, edit off of something more specific. So I see head nodding over here, and I see a head nod over there. Okay.
Editing is easier than creating.
Agreed.
Much easier. So,
So where are they getting this information from, the specific questions, the specific?
Well, we will create a rough draft of some specific strategies off of the 5 levers in June. And then Julie Ornay and the Frost Center for Research will then create the questions off of our draft.
And where do the strategies come from? You and Travis?
Well, Travis and I are gonna create a rough draft, and then we'll all dig in and talk about those on the 14th and the 28th of June. And then that will be what will go to Frost.
Okay, so
Does that
just,
feel-
so I can understand the process. So draft 1 is you and Travis. You're bringing draft 1 to us on the 14th and 28th.
We're gonna bring it to, well, we'll send it to you individually before, so we'll shoot for like June 1 through 5, so you can have a full week to 10
Okay,
days.
and then on 14th through 28th, we together are coming up with draft 2, which is then shopped out to all of these individual stakeholders to get feedback on draft 2,
Through the research center questionnaire.
and then take that and then make draft 3, 4, 8, whatever we end up. Hopefully not up to 8.
You have represented what I have laid out accurately.
my only concern would be I'm trying to picture the 14th, the initial discussion, as long as we can keep it topical, so we're not bouncing around a lot. I would worry about, we all have this big document, we've got all these comments, and we're kind of bouncing topics. I think it'll work, as long as we're kind of staying topical, keeping control of us.
Yeah, so we're gonna be bullet point heavy and focus it around the 5 levers and work really hard to keep it to a couple of pages.
Just some extra structure, just to keep, I know.
Yeah, I
how
mean,
it
we've
will go.
gotten tons of deep reports on all this stuff over the
Yeah.
last months, right? So Travis and I are just gonna like take what we believe are the high level themes of what we've been hearing, and every time we had a lever education, like a presentation, we had a time for feedback from people. And so, we've got notes and all of that. So we've all been commenting into this thing for, 9 months, whether we knew it or not. So, so we're gonna try and do our best. So if we miss something or whatever, obviously that'll be why we have a couple of meetings to like get it right.
That's a lot of work for you two.
Yeah.
Well, not as much as you think, because we're really
So-
good at note taking.
So Brian, you're planning on sending out the rough draft to each one of us individually and soliciting feedback after we've had time to absorb it? Or do you want the feedback on the 14th?
I think that's a good question that so I don't know what the public, nature of the meeting structure rule, I can talk about this in another life where we're not in public and what I would prefer, but I don't know, am I up against rules around that?
What I would say, and Brian and Travis kind of came in and said, hey, this is what we're thinking, which Dave and I were we're thankful and receptive of, right? Because
Yeah.
this is your work, right? At some point, from a staff perspective, we give you information, but then kind of the baton gets handed off at some point, right? So I think what Brian and Travis are suggesting, which is basically, hey, they're gonna work on kind of that strategy level that PJ really has talked about, that strategy level, like, okay, we've got educated on the levers, like, let's give a first draft for you guys to react to. And you sending that out just to the group as just a document, I think is fine, Brian.
I can do a whole group email
Yep.
there. Okay.
Well, or just sending it out to
Send
the
it to
group
each
so they
person.
have it,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Now, what I would encourage you to do is, okay, you've got it. Now you just do your individual homework. Like, don't start, like, don't start, like, doing these email daisy chains or anything like that. And really, you don't have to do that, right? Because it just gives you time to kind of do your homework, make your notes, and then on June 14 and 28 is what we're kind of proposing. You've got good chunks of time, right? To then, for the 8 of you to kind of work through that and say, hey, I like this. Hey, let's talk about this. And then you work through that process, right? But it's not done yet then, right? Because it's all iterative. Where then, as Brian talked about, we think then we're really looking at July as being kind of the heavy community engagement month, where not only you've got the survey for residents and kind of small businesses,
We've got the.
and then kind of that listening tour of kind of key staff with the major corporations. But then we're also thinking, and I know Brian was going to get to this, but we also think in July it'd be appropriate, and I think we're going to be in better shape with masks and all those types of things. You know, I would encourage you all to consider maybe we have, an event at the Civic Center some night, right? Where some people like to engage with surveys, and maybe some people just want to come in and we kind of put some charts up on the wall, and kind of these are the overall strategies that we're looking, and people can engage directly with you at an open house. So we're looking,
And the other one was the group.
the
feedback.
group stakeholders.
So we were going
may-
to have a coordinated time where we could hear in whatever 10 to 15-minute chunks from a group of people that wanted to do a deeper, longer presentation to us, as a way to, whether it's a nonprofit or the chamber or who, so we
Lake
would
Shore
open that up
Advantage
as
or
a
the
special.
climate change group,
Yeah,
or
the
any of those
Holland
types of
climate
things,
change,
right?
Obviously, they've been heavily involved, and so we'd be happy to have them come and do, But Travis and I, we were thinking about it, it's like, well, we'll use Holland Climate Collaborative as a good example. Like, they've been super engaged, and we're not wondering what those folks are thinking, right?
Right.
So I think it would be better feedback if they could respond to something, if they were responding off of a draft that we had, right? So, because we don't need to, wonder what they're thinking. I would rather have their feedback off of something that we think looks decent. And then we can take that feedback, and then we can actually bring their feedback into our process in a more formal way. So that'll also be target July the Civic Center night with beers afterwards on me. And
You bringing those kids?
and
I think we owe you the beers after this work you're gonna do.
well, anyways, but yeah, and then the group feedback, and then you got the Frost research, the different groups, and then the industrial listening tour thing, because of the nature of those folks and how hard they may or may not be to get to. What Travis and I talked to Dave about, because I think he and his team will be heavily involved in a lot of that because it's their clients, is we would create a sort of a framework for that meeting, and then just start trying to get meetings sooner rather than later, because of the nature of how that will be probably tough to get in front of people. And that'll be sort of a rolling thing as quickly as we can sort of get them scheduled.
I heard PJ at Transmatic is just open anytime, that
Your
you
top
wanna
20
go and
customer,
talk to them.
PJ?
7 days a week.
Anyway, so if I didn't misrepresent any of that, I think that was the idea, and then such that doing all of that get the feedback in July. We'd get back together and we'll call it August, and we'll have done our rough drafts, we'll have gotten feedback, and then we'll be sitting down with all of that being like, okay, let's finish.
It sounds like a well-thought-out plan. I'm curious, at the end, do you have something in sight where you are trying to target, just in general? Are we talking August, September?
I don't think
I'm
it's,
curious about closure,
yeah.
path to closure.
I think that I want to say September, but I don't. I'm like, you set expectations.
I know, yeah.
So in my head, I feel like October, I think we can get October done. But it's going to take time for, like, when we get our part done, we're not going to like write every word of this thing and graphic design it. And, there's just going to be other lag time, and I don't know what staff schedules are. And so I don't want to put like, August 15th, we hand them something that we like and then expect council to have it on the 22nd, right?
Right,
That's
right.
unfair to the staff. So I'm just saying October right now, and if we can get it done sooner, no one will be more excited about that than me.
Let's call it third quarter closure target.
There,
That's what we're thinking, right?
there you go.
Dave, is BPW having a study session on the 28th of June?
Until I talk to the BPW about moving it.
Okay, I was just looking at my calendar.
Yeah, and Trav and I need a little time. The reason why we wouldn't meet and get in until June 14 is Trav and I need a little time. And we want to get it to you in more than, like 2 days notice. So Tim, to your point earlier around like, I think if you've got like serious, like clarifying questions around like what we send to you, and you want to just like email and be like, hey, like 3.A, like what do you mean by that? That's no big deal, but I think we want to avoid getting into like, you said 10%, but I think it should be 20, and here's why. I think that needs to be happen in front of everybody. Yeah.
That's good.
Yep.
Okay.
So with the business community, with the business community, are those the individual sessions you're gonna do, or are they coming when you say that they're gonna be hard to meet with? Are they part of the Frost survey, or are they part of visiting their businesses, or how are you getting that? I'm not clear on that.
Well, the major employers would be included on any Frost research like surveys off of the plan that we have. As it relates to so the idea behind the major employer, in my view, is exactly like what Mary Ellen from Steelcase talked to us about, which is like, and I think what we really don't know collectively is like what major employers have explicit or implicit, public or not public goals around this stuff. Is it part of their value system? Do they care about this? What are they doing about it? How aligned will or won't they be to any of this stuff, directionally speaking? I think that's the really valuable layer as it relates to major industrial employers. Like the specifics on programs and that kind of stuff, we can capture that in the Frost, through that survey. But I think what we really want to know is the major employers in town are, what level of excited they are around, how aggressive we feel we should be, right? Like, I mean, it's a huge part of confidence building, I think, for us, is especially considering the very heavy industrial nature of our environmental footprint in town, knowing to what degree the business community is behind what we're doing is just tailwinds, in my opinion. And so being intentional around getting that feedback, we just want to get that going as soon as possible. We talked about this, and Dave can correct me, but I think the committee should be invited, or one or two people from the committee should be invited to these meetings. And we're not all going to make it every time, we probably all shouldn't go every time. But it would be great if we can all look at calendars and come August or September, when we've had most of these meetings, at least one of us has been at all of those meetings alongside the appropriate staff. I think that'll just be well, I know that'll be eye-opening for a lot of people and really good.
Yeah, I think we would work to set up meetings and then just make them available with like a slot or two, so
Yeah.
that, you know, we don't overwhelm
Yeah,
an
you don't
employer with
overwhelm.
a group of 8 showing up, you know, beyond staff. But I think, you know, having it available so that you can say, oh, that works for my calendar, or that one works for my calendar, maybe, and give some representation of the importance from a community perspective that, you know, this group is going through this effort and very interested in understanding what plans, what initiatives, you know, the employers already have in place.
Right.
But also what on-ramps, as we talk about that term, are meaningful and important for a community to consider for, you know, certain employers, and which are not, you know, which are maybe not gonna be motivating. And so I think that's a key part of that learning. And then there's also an accounting side of that learning too, because we've had some surveys done where we showed that some respondents said, some businesses said they were already buying renewable energy credits. I mean, we know that Boyd took the step to make his business carbon neutral for the next year. Well, there's part of an awareness that that's important from a whole community accounting perspective that we need to understand and build systems to try to tie that in on an ongoing basis too. So I think there's some real opportunity from the idea of meeting individually, but that would be the structure of it. We'd set it up and then make it available, and then whoever could respond to it, you know, as we fill out the spots, you know, we would fill those out.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Nikki?
Yes, I wondered what the mechanism there, it's more individual as opposed to the Civic Center where you'd have more public engagement.
Yeah, they'd be invited to all that for sure, but I think we
Sure.
would
They-
definitely
they're
want to, I mean,
individuals,
you know, it'd be a goal to like get in a room with LG Chem and get in a room with Hayworth and get in a room, you know, we want to have that FaceTime. I think everybody's motivated to have that FaceTime and get that feedback directly. So,
And maybe just because clarity is great, right? So kind of the way we thought about it, Nikki, is like 4 different things, and at least one of them has 2 components to it. So you've got the listening, kind of the listening tour, right, of major companies. You've got a survey that we really rely on Frost Center at Hope to do. But there's kind of 2 surveys. There'd be one that's really resident-based only, and then there's another that's business-based. And probably that business-based, you know, the questions are gonna lean more towards, quite frankly, the smaller businesses, not like the really, you know, the major corporations, although they're welcome to, and they'll get that survey also. So that's kind of the second thing. And then kind of the community open house, right, is kind of the full thing for everyone to do. And then the other one would be still having a meeting where if there are some of those, you know, group stakeholders that want to come in and, you know, get 10, 15 minutes on an agenda and kind of share their ideas back with you, the Lakeshore Advantages, the Climate Change Collaborative, the Chamber, all those types of things. We'll try to, we'll facilitate that also for that opportunity. So those are kind of the 4 pillars I'm thinking that we've had the discussions with Brian Travis about, of what I think is a pretty robust, you know, engagement feedback loop.
Process.
good. So a couple things outside of our control related to that are, in particular, like the Frost Center, like how quickly they can execute and get feedback and get their report back to us is something that we don't totally control. And so there's a little caveat there around maybe we don't get all that back before the end of July, and, you know, we get pushed 2 weeks. And so that's to me, a big one, in terms of getting from here to like the other side of the feedback, which is just another reason why I think
Have we already
having
given,
a site set on October is good.
have we already given Frost a heads up that we're gonna be coming? So they're aware?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we talked about this. Dave and Keith can get rolling on creating the foundation of the questionnaire, and then that can get tweaked once we've had June 14 and June 28th versus them waiting until the end of June 28th at the end of our meeting and then them working on creating all the questions from scratch. So, I mean, we know what the levers are. We know, they know broadly like what the questions are going to be around. And then at that point, we can just speed defrost a little bit quicker versus making them wait until whatever, June 14 or June 28 to like start. So that's some of the ways we talked about, like, how can we go as slowly as appropriate for effectiveness, but also not be out into 2022. So, do people like this? Are we missing
Yes.
anything?
That sounds
I would say
great.
any one of us would say, if you need any help, you and Travis, please ask. I mean, we all can
Well-
write, and we certainly can talk, and, we can help you out with that.
Yeah, that's what June 14 and June 28 is. I mean, we're gonna put something in front of you, and then you're gonna tear it apart or make it better. I mean, everybody's gonna have a
But
ton of.
in the meantime, too, I mean, it just seems not that fair for you to do all that.
It's okay. We'll figure it
That's
out.
why you get,
Yeah,
okay,
that's why we're getting the big bucks.
The really big one.
Yeah.
good.
Okay. Well, let me revisit my agenda here. Okay. So we're not going to meet in 2 weeks. That's also Memorial Day, FYI.
Yeah.
And we're going to meet on the 14th. Dave is going to work on BPW change up for the 28th. If we can if we can come to an agreement on the 14th, then we don't need to do the 28th. Not that that's
Snacks
better
and
than
stay
something
longer.
else. There you go. Yeah, so expect something from Travis and I between the 1st and the 5th of June.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there and get feedback and write a report. Good?
And Brian, I would even maybe because I know everyone, you get into summer and there's just a lot of moving parts. I kind of looked out even further on calendars. So absolutely, I would, June 14 and 28, 3 to 5. This seems to work as good as anything, right? This location. That first otherwise normal meeting in July is right at 4th of July. And I think, Dave, you guys, the BPW's normal schedule is the 12th and the 26th, correct?
Yeah, so if we.
So what I would recommend is, I think you should pencil in July 19.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I think what we'll maybe look at is somewhere earlier in July, maybe that's an opportunity where maybe we have, instead of a regular Monday afternoon meeting, maybe we can find, and give us time, right? But maybe that's where if you guys have some stuff on the 14th and 28th, maybe that's a community open house possibility somewhere in there.
What date?
Earlier in July.
Not naming it, just
Yeah.
find something, earlier in July.
I think that for sure the July 19, assuming we
And
can
we'll
make
see,
that.
I mean, I think, but the most that we'd probably do in July is that community open house type thing, and if we're not ready, we're not ready, right?
Well, and we could also get the group feedback
Right,
in
you could
theory
do the 10,
on the
15-minute segments of
Yeah.
groups that are identified.
On the
That could be on the
19th.
19th.
Exactly, and that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yep.
And then in August, I think I think the dates that BPW usually looks at are the 9th and the 23rd.
Correct.
So why don't you tentatively just hold, and it's a 5 Monday month, which means that you guys get to have a 3 Monday month in August. So maybe tentatively just look at 2, 16, and 30.
Okay.
And it's always easier, right, to have more on your calendar and back them off than try to put them on later.
So removing the 12th and 26th of July, correct? And adding the 19th.
Correct.
Correct, because the BPW has conflicts for the 12th and 26th, the BPW board.
Yeah, I think that based on what we know to be true right now, June 14 and 28, we hammer out a draft. July 19, we get the group feedback. Sometime in July, we shoot to get the open house done.
Yep.
Whenever. And then August, ideally, August 2, 16, and 30 is us having had all the feedback, and we're in, like,
Big
you know,
month.
finish it
Yeah,
mode.
big month.
Yep. That would be, I think we can do that.
Yeah.
Good.
Be busy.
Good?
Because then September is more socializing, prettying it up.
Be able to
There you
do it
go.
till
Right.
The 20th anyhow, on September.
And I appreciate Brian, you know, he said something, I want to echo that. I think one of the things that's a fair criticism looking back, you know, and I say that with a lot of people that have done a lot of fantastic work on this, but figuring out how to make sure when we do the report, like, let's spend a little bit extra time on the graphics and, you know, make it really readable and all those types of things, which a lot of times we've all been there, right? You get to the end of the process and you're just like, I just want to get the report out, right? And I think what I've heard is at that step, let's not shortchange that step, and let's make sure that that report that we produce, if it takes a little bit more time, you know, to really make that a very effective communication piece, let's take that time.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Great. Okay. Unless there's anything else, we're gonna be done early today, party people.
It's the first?
Wow,
It's the first?
I'm done.
David, you good? Keith? Jeffrey? Nikki? Tim? PJ? Boyd?
Get your gavel out.
Meeting adjourned.
Bang.